I'm Sandesh Bartlett.
And I'm Ashwini Vethakan. We begin with a look at the COVID-19 situation in the island. As of last week, the number of COVID-19 infected patients in Sri Lanka stood at 5,244, with the number of recoveries reaching 3,380. Earlier this week, a cargo operations employee of a leading international airline tested positive for COVID-19. The airline says 50 employees on the same shift have been subjected to PCR testing, and the management is currently awaiting results.
Meanwhile, the extraordinary gazette on coronavirus disease regulations was issued on Thursday, Sri Lankan authorities said. The Ministry of Health said with the issuance of this new gazette notification, the courts will henceforth be able to issue either both sentences of imposing a fine of not more than Rs 10,000 and a prison sentence of 6 months, or one of the two sentences against those who break the law.
And now for a roundup of local news. The GMOA has stated that the Colombo district is a high-risk area for the spread of COVID-19. The GMO secretary noted that PCR testings should be increased by 10,000 a day from its current figure of 6,000. While considering several criteria such as human capacity, the number of PCR tests and the technical capacity when increasing the number of PCR tests, the GMOA has also stated that failure to implement zonal lockdowns accurately in the country could make it challenging to identify the virus's spread zones, which in turn could force an immediate nationwide lockdown.
An air bubble concept will be applied when US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visits Sri Lanka later this month, authorities have said. The same was applied during bilateral negotiations between the top-level Chinese delegation that visited the island and the President and Prime Minister earlier this month. Secretary of State Pompeo will visit the country on October 28th and is scheduled to hold talks with the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
The government has granted approval to import 6,000 metric tons of basmati rice annually under the provision of the Pakistan-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, the cabinet spokesman said. He also stated that the private sector would be permitted to import basmati rice under this provision as well.
In other news, the state is giving priority to complete construction of the Central Expressway. The inauguration of the Ruwanpura Expressway construction work, as well as completion of construction activities of the Kalaniya and Aturgiri Expressway, the cabinet spokesperson said. He also noted that the impetus to develop expressways is part of the national policy titled Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, which encompasses developing the national economy via an interconnected highway network.
Moving on to business news. Turnover at the Colombo Stock Exchange crossed the 5 billion rupee mark on Wednesday for the second consecutive day, amid increased high net worth institutional and retail activity, although foreign participation continued to remain subdued. The day's turnover topped 5.5 billion rupees, which is a 9.3% increase from Tuesday's turnover of 5.03 billion rupees, the highest recorded since January this year.
Sri Lanka's tea exports for the month of September recorded a drop in terms of volume, but in terms of value, higher revenues were fetched compared to the corresponding month in the previous year. The Sri Lanka Tea Board statistics show that for September, the quantity of tea exported declined by 1.5 million kilograms to 24.1 million kilograms compared to September 2019, although earnings increased by 0.9 billion year-on-year to Rs 21.9 billion.
In other news, the government this week announced a high cess on imports of apparel. According to Capital Alliance, a higher taxation will add to government revenue whilst encouraging domestic production of apparel at an affordable price.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, Sri Lanka and China took further steps to strengthen mutual cooperation on water technology. The Chinese embassy in Sri Lanka's Charge d'Affaires and Sri Lanka's Minister of Water Supply signed a supplementary agreement to the MOU on water research and technology cooperation on behalf of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Water Supply of Sri Lanka, respectively.
Now let's take a look at the coronavirus highlights from around the world. The total number of COVID-19 cases has now surpassed 39 million, with the recovered number being over 29 million. French health authorities on Thursday reported that the number of new daily coronavirus infections rose above 30,000 for the first time since the start of the epidemic. Meanwhile, at a press conference in Copenhagen, the WHO's Regional Director for Europe, Hans Klug, has told reporters it was time to step up measures as rising case numbers on the continent were of great concern.
And finally, according to the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, strong international cooperation on COVID-19 vaccines could accelerate economic recovery globally. The Managing Director said this could add $9 trillion to global income by 2025. Speaking at a news conference after a meeting of the IMF Steering Committee, Kristalina Georgieva also called on the United States and China to keep up strong economic stimulus that could help boost the global recovery. She emphasized the need for vaccines to be distributed evenly among developing countries and wealthy nations to boost confidence in travel, investment, trade, and other activities.
That's all the news we have for you this week.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thank you for watching.
And stay safe.